Welcome to lben Teahouse. I am lben, your host. In our country, many believe that before either significant life events or minor incidents occur, there are always some omens. For instance, there's an old saying that if your left eyelid twitches, it signifies wealth, whereas the right eyelid twitching foretells disaster. Also, if you drop your chopsticks during a meal, the elderly would say it suggests a forthcoming scolding, and so they would smack you first to end the matter preemptively. Sometimes, when dinnerware is accidentally broken, children will promptly utter "May there be peace" year after year. A phrase which, in the art of feng shui, is known as a verbal talisman of plum blossom divination. The breaking of objects signifies bad luck, but the immediate following of auspicious words symbolizes blooming and bearing fruit, signifying wealth and prosperity. Do not underestimate these acts. People who frequently speak auspicious words often live longer than those who always talk about unfortunate things because, at the least, they do not experience misfortune. In our daily lives, various taboos and omens are omnipresent, and such things are also widespread in every profession. Take the opera actor Li Yuanhang as an example, where the biggest taboo in their practice is the breaking of a string. The story of the old school opera roles, Lu Hanchen and his senior Gao San, as an example, in 1927. They were executed because of a misunderstanding with a concubine. Before their execution, the person responsible was Li Da-sun, the head of the Tianjin Military Police Inspector's office. Head Li was also an opera enthusiast, especially fond of watching Lu Hanchen perform. And they had a good relationship outside of work. Head Li thought it was merely the concubine having a temper, not to the extent of truly executing Lu Hanchen. So he was in great agony as military orders were absolute and he could not avoid his responsibility as an official. Before the task was executed, Head Li still followed the procedure, brought Lu Hanchen and Gao San out, and informed them of their release, which should have been good news. Before they could leave, Head Li suddenly expressed a wish to hear them perform a scene of opera once more. Gao San played the instrument, and Lu, the manager, sang. Believing they had been saved, their spirits were lifted. However, during the performance, Gao San's string broke 3 times, which immediately unsettled them. In panic, Gao San knelt and pleaded with Head Li, inquiring if they were truly being released. Although Head Li gave his word, shortly after the two walked away, Head Li drew his gun and executed them both. The hidden malice behind this decoy revealed Head Li's cruelty. He provided the performers with an illusion of salvation just before their death, with the broken string being an ominous sign of the impending tragedy. The story goes like this: I have a classmate in the Department of Chinese Language and Literature at Peking University who shared with me an interesting experience. Since my major is in beautification and hairstyling, let's just pretend I'm from Peking University when I tell this story. My classmate's name is Dabo, and he was a good friend of mine at school. The story happened during his high school years. For a few days, Dabo felt that his eyelids were constantly twitching, which he took as a bad sign. His grandfather, an octogenarian who was not exactly on death's door but had been bedridden for many years, had a particular fondness for Dabo, as he had grown up under his grandfather's care. It wasn't until high school that Dabo left his grandfather to study in the county town. The twitching of his eyelids made Dabo anxious, to the point where not only his classmates knew about it, but even his dormitory mates were aware. He thought that if something unfortunate were to happen, he might need to find an opportunity to go home for a visit. But as it was his senior year of high school, it wasn't easy just to leave. Until one day, while copying notes in class feeling unsettled and his mind in chaos, the pen he was holding suddenly broke, spilling ink all over the desk. This was the pen his grandfather had given him, which he had used since middle school, and he had never heard of anyone's pen breaking like that. Out of desperation, Dabo asked his teacher for leave and decided to go home immediately. Without waiting for the bus, he took a 3-hour ride to finally get home. As he entered the house, he saw people everywhere, his heart sank, and he cried and rushed into the yard, thinking only of how he could have missed his grandfather's last moments. But as he hurriedly called out for his grandfather, the old man asked in surprise, "My grandson, what's the matter? Why did you think I was dead?" It turned out that the grandfather had been seriously ill these past few days, and the entire family thought he wouldn't survive. Even funeral arrangements were made, just waiting for the old man's last breath. However, the night before Dabo returned, something miraculous happened. His uncle and several aunts were taking the night watch as the old man had been barely breathing. But during the night, the grandfather suddenly woke up, clamoring for sugar. This small matter of a sugar cube attracted the neighbors. Everyone thought that the grandfather was beyond help, but he suddenly became lively again. The uncle and aunts were all stunned. How could the grandfather, who had been bedridden for over 3 years, suddenly recover. That night, due to his worries, Dabo hurried back home, and the whole family thought he came back for a celebration. Even his grandfather was surprised to see him. Later, everyone understood what had happened. The grandfather's sudden recovery was like a miracle. So they indulged him and were willing to give him whatever he wanted, but the old man didn't have any special requests. This story was told to me by my classmate from Peking University, a student of Chinese literature. Although my field is in beautification and hairstyling, the story feels as real as if I had experienced it myself. This classmate, named Dabo, had this experience during his high school days. Over a period of days, he noticed his eyelid kept twitching and felt it was a bad omen. Dabo's grandfather was quite old and in poor health, having been bedridden for many years. Although there were many grandchildren in the family, the grandfather was particularly fond of Dabo. However, when Dabo went to high school, he had to leave his grandfather to study in the county town. The constant twitching of his eyelids unsettled him, and he felt he might need to go home to see his grandfather, even though it was a critical time during his senior year of high school. On that day, while Dabo was writing in school, he felt very distressed, and suddenly the fountain pen in his hand broke. It was the one his grandfather had given him and he had been using it until now. He had never heard of such a thing happening, so he immediately asked for leave and went home. After rushing for 3 hours, when he arrived home, he saw that the house was filled with people. Fearing the worst, he rushed into the yard with tears streaming down his face, frantically calling for his grandfather. To his surprise, his grandfather was perfectly fine and asked him why he was crying again. It turned out that his grandfather was not in any serious trouble, and upon learning the truth, Dabo felt as if a great weight had been lifted from his heart. 3 days later, his grandfather was about to celebrate his 85th birthday and decided to gather friends and relatives to celebrate. Since the family had already prepared the morning hall for a funeral, reusing it for the birthday banquet felt rather special. On that day, family and friends gathered together, and the old man had a very joyful time. Dabo thought he could happily return to school afterward, but after the last celebratory feast, the old man lay down and never got up again. As he was passing, the grandfather opened his eyes to answer the question everyone had been wanting to ask for days, but no one dared to. The old man slowly revealed the reason. He was supposed to have died on a certain night, but he felt that someone was always holding him back. He heard that, according to fortune tellers, he was meant to live until 85, and since he hadn't reached that age, they let him go. 3 days before his 85th birthday, he saw someone come into the room, who gave him a medicine, saying it would make him stand up right away, but he would still have to leave after 3 days. After that person fed him the medicine and talked about a fate that stretched back 80 years, he said an old Taoist had given him extra years to live to 85 and cautioned him not to reveal the secrets of heaven, or he would have no life left. After saying this, the person took a flower and left. The old man recognized that flower. It was the one carried by the old Taoist his mother had saved years ago. The old Taoist gave him life, and now he had returned to fulfill that promise. After the old man finished telling his story, he passed away. As for who the old Taoist was, the old man did not say, and so it became an eternal secret. This story shows us that some secrets of heaven must not be revealed.